Back to the days when I was running a garage in Browns Valley back in 46 and 47. These McGuckins were sheep herders, and they lived up in the Caddo Hills, and they had an old Model A Ford pickup. And it was the first Model A's built, and they had the gas pedal up underneath the steering wheel. And so they never did use the starter on it. They'd pull the old gas pedal all the way, the gas handle all the way down, and then one of them would crank it, and then the old man and the two sons would all pile into the pickup, and they'd get her shifted into high gear and never use the foot throttle. Just motor was running wide open all the time. They wanted to slow down. They'd just step on the clutch, slip the clutch. So consequently, they needed a new clutch about every 6 weeks or so. So they would always bring it down to Browns Valley for me to put a new clutch in it. So they all wore a sheep pelt. They just skin out a sheep and get the pelt, and I guess they'd oil it up and soften it up, but it never was tanned. And they wore them. They cut a couple armholes in them, and they wore those sheep pelts winter and summer. In the summertime, they'd wear them with the wool out. If the weather'd get cold, they'd turn them around with the wool inside. So they wore them things all the time. They were short, squat fellows. They probably weren't over 5'4" or 5 inches tall, and about an axe handle wide across the shoulders. Pretty well built guys. So while I was putting the clutch in their pickup, they'd all go over to the saloon and they'd do their grocery shopping or whatever. And when they came back to the garage to pick up their pickup in the evening, when it was time to go home, they was all pretty well into their cups, and part of the trip of coming to town was to have a wrestle or a fight with somebody. So before they'd pay their bill on the pickup, I always had to fight one or the other of them. It didn't make any difference, the old man or the sons. Nobody was mad. It was just part of the coming to town. So when we'd get out in the alley behind the garage there and have a little hoop-de-doo, and after one of them was down on the ground and bleeding a little bit, then a big smile and shake hands all around. They'd pay their bill and they'd go home till the next time. Well, now these was the same guys, only now the old man had died, and these were the same McGuckin brothers that was out there at the fish fry that night. It was cloudy and expecting a storm, and it was dark. You couldn't see anything out there, and they'd got to betting if among the people out there, if me and one of the McGuckin brothers went out on the dock, which one of us would go in the lake. Well, I wasn't in favor of this little game, but there was no way I could really get out of it. So, well, I know every move these McGuckins make. I really didn't need any light to see. So, just about the time we were to begin, we were both out on the dock there, and so of course a lot of other guys hooting and hollering. And I remembered my glasses, so I took them out of I put them in my styrofoam glasses case, and just told Squint, I said, "Here, take my glasses." And I was just handing them to me when McGuckin came with his head down and hit me right in the middle, which I knew he would do, but I had my back to the lake end of the dock, and I just dropped on my back and came right on up and over with McGuckin and give him a little toss and a big splash, and he went in the lake, but so did my glasses. So when I got back to the cabin, then I really hadn't been gone too terribly long, and I didn't want to tell Mother I'd been over to the fish fry. So the next morning I said, I think I lost my glasses when I was switching the boat from the dock up on the beach when the water was getting so rough and the wind was coming up and it was stormy. So, but I had looked right straight across the lake west, and I could see that fish fry over there, and it looked to me like the wind was just coming right straight down the line from that fish fry over to our beach. So I thought there was a possibility that them glasses might have washed out on shore there, but I didn't think there was too much of a chance of it. So uh, myself and Mary and Jackie went out and we searched up and down the beach there while Mother was making breakfast. And after Mother had finished breakfast, and she went out there and took a look on the beach, and by golly, she found my glasses. They had washed a little further up on the shore than we were looking. I was looking too close to the water line, but them waves had coming in there. They was washing back pretty far, but and then Mother did find my glasses. It was sometime during the winter of '67 and '68, I think, when Laura came to stay here. Now, Bill had gotten married, and he was in the Air Force down at Lincoln. Well, then when he was getting transferred to Lincoln, he brung Laura and the kids back here to stay. And I took that same movie camera, and I took movies of Bill pulling the Rex and Billy on toboggans out here in the snow. And I had some ponies here, and one of them was Ricky's pony. Little old Gray Eagle was his name, and named after a famous horse that I used to ride in the rodeos. And he was quite a wild little horse, and we had a rope on him trying to halter break him, and Ricky was in his short pants, and he had the rope on Gray Eagle, and Gray Eagle took him flying down the driveway here. He's taking strides about 20 feet long, but he hung on to him until he finally got his head switched off to the side, and he got him stopped. And I took some other movies of those horses. Now, I don't know if I ever did get those movies finished, but the films are around here someplace, and we can see some movies that we took of Ricky when he was a little guy, and of Gray Eagle and Misty, and of Rex and Billy and the toboggan in the snow and such. Should be some very interesting movies to look at. Bill's buddies from the Air Force had come out here with him, and they'd take Mary's ponies and they'd ride them out here, and they just ruined those ponies as far as Mary's riding them is concerned. Because those little ponies would buck pretty good, especially if the guys kicked them a little bit, and they'd take them out here in the field north of the driveway and start the ponies running north in the snow, and then they was betting about who would ride the farthest before he made his print in the snow out there, which none of them got very far. I don't think any of them ever made 100 yards out there before the ponies throwed them. And, they had a lot of fun, and it was quite an interesting time. And it was during this time too that one of Mary's ponies had a colt for the first time. It was a little bay pony. We called her Nell, and she had a colt. The colt was bay too, but a real cute little thing. And I had gone out in the morning and to do my chores, and fairly early in the morning, Mother and Mary weren't out of bed yet. And I come back in the house. I brung that little pony colt along with me, and I stood him here on the kitchen floor, and then went and called Mary and Mother to come out and take a look. Mary was quite thrilled with that little baby pony here on the kitchen floor. It wasn't much bigger than a good-sized dog. In 1967, I'd bought a new Dodge car too. I don't know if I'd mentioned that earlier in this story, but one of the few new cars I ever bought. I bought that new '67 Dodge and put a lot of miles on it before we finally junked her out. I worked at the arsenal then from '67 to '70. I was in the summer of '68, I think, when Gail and Nick and family had gone up to Stowe Lake and rented a couple of cabins up there, and they took Mother and Mary along with them, and they stayed a week out there, and Mother had called home here and had said possibly I should come out for the weekend. I couldn't get any time off from the arsenal, and Gail and Nick had to come home, so um, they had left her next morning after I drove out there on a Friday after work, and we retained one of the cabins then for the rest of the weekend. But Nick and Gail had to leave the next morning, so we had a pontoon boat went along with this cabin, and Mother and Mary and I were out fishing then after Nick and Gail had left. We gone over to the southwest corner of the lake. There was a little uh, kind of a drain there, but there had been a dam in it sometime or other, but the dam was no longer functional. The gate was open in it, just a little short dam. I suppose a little runway there about 10 feet wide, and there was a small part of the lake on the other side of that dam. So we'd run the pontoon up on the rocks there, right where this waterway run between those two lakes. So I had fixed up one rod and reel with a big gob of night crawlers on it. The water was only 2 or 3 feet deep there, and I just dropped it over the side and left that lay there. And then we were casting with daredevils, and we were picking up a northern now and then. And pretty soon I see the sinker on that other line that I left there just took off and was heading for the lake. So I reeled in my other rod and reel with a daredevil on it, and laid that down, and then picked this other one up and was going to reel in whatever I had on it. Only thing is, when I started pulling on the line, the drag just wouldn't wind it in. The fish just didn't even slow him down. He just kept right on going. And he went on out to the end of that line where I didn't have any more left, and just without even any slowdown or anything, just broke the line and kept on going. So we had quite an exciting chase. It's a very memorable time. We picked up our anchors off of the rocks and pushed the pontoon boat out in the lake, because we could see that bobber come up every once in a while. So we started chasing that, and it was getting late in the day, but we still had a little bit of daylight. And so we chased that bobber around until I did finally manage to get a hold of the line. And Mary was driving the boat, and Mother and I were leading one over each side trying to catch that line. And we finally caught the line, and then I was pulling it in, and this fish had got pretty well tired out by that time, I suppose, with all the chasing we'd done. And so Mother got the landing net, and I started pulling the fish up, and she got the landing net down there, and I said, reach way back. This fish is pretty long. So she reached back quite a ways and then jabbed down with the landing net, and she still hit the fish. And of course, when she hit him, I'd got him just so I could see the head, and I still ain't sure to this day what it was. It's either a supersized muskellunge, or it was a catfish, a tremendous catfish. I wasn't sure. But anyhow, the fish just broke the line again, but he still had the bobber on. So the chase was on again, and I started using my other rod and reel end with a daredevil on it, and I did finally manage to get that tangled up in the line, and I, with the other bobber, and I started reeling that fish in, and I had reeled him in, and I getting him alongside the pontoon boat again, and Mother reached way back this time with the dip net. I'd started to raise the fish's head out of the water, but it was getting kind of dark by that time, and I really couldn't get a real good look at him. But when Mother went down to get under the tail end of the fish with the dip net, she hit the fish again, and then he flopped his head and just broke the line, so I didn't have any bobber to follow anymore. So that ended our chase. But it was a very exciting moment. I think Mary will remember that all her days, and I'm sure that Mother and I will. We didn't catch the fish, but it was probably more fun than if we had. So that was in the summer, I think in the summer of '68. Let's see, in 1970, in February, the arsenal closed, and I think that's the summer that we had the family reunion here at our place. That was in June, I think, of 1970. It's in the old family reunion record books, and we had quite a party here. I don't think the old family reunion has ever been the same since, but my Aunt Millie was here, and my Aunt Anna, that's my only living aunts, and at this date now, and the last day of January 1982, they're both still living, to my knowledge. And a funny thing happened there during that family reunion, and Sharon and Judy always get a big kick out of this. I had some Holstein heifers that I'd planned on selling them as springing heifers, but I kept them a little too long, and they had their calves, so I had to start milking those heifers and milking them by hand. So they weren't. They certainly weren't well trained, and so I had to tie the legs on a couple of them when I was milking them. And of course, Sharon and Judy thought this would be quite funny. Quite interesting. Come out there and watch me milk those wild bucking heifers. And so, of course, they were on green grass, and one of them had dropped a big puddle right there, and I put a rope on her leg, and I pulled the rope back and tied it to the barn wall behind her, and then I was just going to get up and go up and sit down on a stool and start to milk her, and she'd raise that leg up to try to kick, and of course she couldn't kick, and she'd come down real hard with it on the floor right in that big pie, and of course the splash, I got my face full, and not just my face either, but I got my face full, and I seen the two girls. All of a sudden they had to leave the barn. They were humped up, and neither one of them wanted to laugh there in the barn, but they had to because this looked so funny. But they took off and they left the barn, and so they had came up to the house laughing hilariously and told Ma what happened. And so when I finished my milking job, and I'd taken rags out there in the barn and wiped it off as well as I could, but I still wasn't very clean, and I come up in the house then, and of course the two girls were sitting here still trying to keep laughing, and Mother had kind of a sly grin on her face too, so she knew what happened. So I said, well, just call me old shit face, and that did it. Sharon and Judy just collapsed, and they couldn't hold it in any longer, but they laugh about it to this day yet whenever they think of it. After the arsenal closed down, then I designed and put up pole buildings, or any kind of a building. I run an ad, and people would bid on buildings, and then I would design or building to fit their purpose. And if I got the bid, I'd hire a crew, and I would build it. And among the buildings I put up is that telephone in the background there. That was just Gail calling to see how Mama and I were doing. This is the 31st of January in 1982. I'll go on about the buildings. Among the buildings I had designed and put up is the greenhouse here, and the auxiliary to the greenhouse here in Lindstrom, Minnesota. I suppose that building will stand longer than I will, so some of my grandchildren want to look, see a building that Grandpa put up. Well, that's one of them. After a while, the price of material had got so you couldn't make an intelligent bid on a building, and by the time it'd take the customer to make up his mind and accept the bid, then you'd find out the price of building material had gone up by 20% or so. So the inflation was beginning to set in very seriously there. And then in the summer of 1970, 71, 72, and during this time that I had drew up some prints how to how to make a building in sections and precast it out of concrete. And I had told Bill, I said, someday when you want to go into a business, here'd be a real good business to go into. So I drew up those blueprints for Bill, and Bill had kept them for quite a few years, and had never really done anything about them until this year when he started. He got hooked up with another guy over there in Wisconsin, and they started putting up those buildings. And now this year of 1982, most of the building business is very bad. It's just non-existent. The contractors and everything are going broke, but without any advertising or anything, Bill with his concrete building, which he can underbid everybody, is doing quite well with it. After I couldn't make an intelligent bid on a building myself, then I started selling buildings for WIC. That's a builder over in Wisconsin. I went down to their plant down at Mount Horeb down in Wisconsin, and took a look at their plant and made arrangements with the people, and we started selling WIC buildings. And I did that for a few years, and I was teaching catechism here too. And during this time, I ain't sure what year this was, that Father LaChapelle and the La Salettes were here at that time then, and they had some books down there teaching catechism, and I was very disillusioned with the books that they had for teaching. They were teaching humanism, not Christianity, or not the New Testament like the church. They had just kind of slipped out of that, so I was getting very concerned about that. And in the meantime, a mother and Cheech and a few other women here had gone down to a prayer group that had started operating down in Minneapolis, down at Regina High School. And I'd heard about this charismatic renewal, and well, this is a wonderful thing, but I really didn't need it. And Lynn she was teaching some catechism too. Well, I decided that this mother and Cheech had told me about these prayer groups and singing in tongues and this stuff, and I thought, well, this would be a good thing for my catechism class to see this. So I had to make arrangements with all the parents, because you couldn't expose somebody's child to something like that without the consent of the parents. And so not everybody let their kids go, but I arranged transportation. I took my car, and Dale and Lynn had a Lincoln then, and we took that. And that was in the winter time when we went down there. It had rained, and it was just glare ice all the way down. So it was quite a risky trip to go down there. But we took our 2 loads of kids, and we went, and we were in this charismatic prayer group there, and I was listening to what was going on. I watching for a reaction from my catechism pupils, and there didn't seem to be much of anybody directing anything. it just seemed to be happening. And then I heard some some musical notes start from someplace in the crowd. Now there had to be about 1,500 people there in that building. It was full. Maybe I'm overestimating the number, but there was a lot of people in there. And I listened to these musical notes, and they're not all the same, but I listened to this great number of people. It's really hard to tell who's doing it. You would look around and you couldn't tell who was singing and who wasn't. And I am sort of a musician. I play by ear, so I can hear a chord when I hear it, and pretty soon I've got goosebumps. I'm listening and I think, how can this possibly be? You got all of these people, and they certainly haven't rehearsed this. And even if they did, you couldn't get all those people to sing, and it'd be a perfect chord with no notes out of tune. And yet, my musical ear is telling me that this is a perfect chord. It's impossible. You can't do it, and yet here it is. I'm listening to it, and well, I don't know just what effect that really did have on my catechism class to this day yet, but I know what an effect it had on me. I had to do an entire re-evaluation of what life was all about. So it has had a very profound effect upon my life to this day yet, and I hope it'll continue to do so. There's nothing else has any meaning other than whatever service you can do to your Lord, and the only thing that man will leave on his family is as an extension of himself is his children, his children's children, and on into generations and generations. When I look back, I can be very, very happy with that trip down there to Regina, and how it has removed a lot of scales from my eyes. It'd be beautiful if this could happen to everybody. During this time, Mary she was a growing young girl and always interested in things. We got pictures of her and an old Rebel, her riding horse, and she had her dog on her horse with us. She had found a golden nail cocoon out here in the yard, and she, of course, had brung that in and making a project of that cocoon hatch out and become a butterfly. She was watching that very interestedly, and finally the butterfly did emerge from the cocoon in the jar, and of course his wings were wet yet, he couldn't fly very well, so she'd taken the butterfly on her finger and had gone outside and sitting out there in the sun to let the butterfly's wings dry off, and finally I guess the butterfly thought he was ready to fly, but evidently he wasn't. He took off from her hand and fluttered down, and it was a monarch butterfly, and he fluttered down and hit the sidewalk here, and Mary's old cat, Thomasina, had pounced on that butterfly and killed it, and Mary was very mad. She come storming back in the house to get the broom, and she was going to kill that dumb cat. That was her pet cat, but she learned about life's little tragedies, how these things can happen. It was about this time I was sitting here reading my Bible one morning, and I would feel very much closeness to the Lord, and still do. My time with the Lord is early in the morning, and I get up, and I had gotten up in the morning, and I was reading some of the epistles of the New Testament, and I was reading these, and I was meditating on the guys that wrote these. That these were a bunch of men who never went to school. They certainly didn't have any formal education, and they didn't know how to read and write, and yet they had wrote this the world's bestseller. Nobody's ever been able to match it since. And I was meditating on that, and I said, Lord, if these old hillbillies, uneducated people, could write these epistles, and with your help, I could write a newspaper column. And I really didn't realize what I was saying, but that bugged me for several days, and I finally said, well, okay, then let's do it. So I sat down at my typewriter here, and we wrote a newspaper column called The Village Blacksmith. And I had a bunch of homespun philosophy, and but the message of the Lord was always in there. And I took them down to the local newspaper, and they read it, and they liked it, and they bought it right away. So I continued to do that until the newspaper changed hands, and then they got to monitoring what I write, and sometimes changing a few words and whatnot. So I just quit writing it, and I about 5 or 6 months ago, when I quit writing it, and I haven't heard anything more from them. But that part of it, that's the Lord's end of the business, not mine. So perhaps we'll write it again sometime. We don't know. It depends on what the Lord decides to do. There was a prayer group started up that at North Branch, and we went to that prayer group for a while. But after a while, this group began to bother me pretty much, because the feelings seemed to be growing among some of the members of that prayer group that they no longer needed the church, and yet my Lord, my God, tells me that that's wrong. The only teaching authority on this earth is the church. There's no other, and that's a promise from God Himself. And when people begin to get holier than the church, or so holy that they don't need the church, then there's something wrong with that group. So we sort of drifted away from it, and that group did kind of break up. And it was about this time too that I built a trellis out here and poured a sidewalk leading from the house out to the barnyard, and put a trellis up over that. And David brung some bittersweet he'd dug up out in the woods, and we had some woodbine we'd already planted there, and so that grew up over that trellis pretty well. Well, now this last summer, that old trellis finally rotted off and broke down, so I got some penta-treated posts and put a steel top on it and rebuilt that trellis. So the trellis that's out there now, I built that in the summer of I think it was this last summer, the summer of '81, or else the summer of '82. I ain't sure which, but my memory is not as good now as it was when I was younger. Bill had got divorced, and Art had got divorced, and Dale had got divorced, and we were feeling a lot of the pressures and whatnot of this, until we'd finally learned that instead of trying to preach at anybody or telling them what they should do or what they shouldn't do, that we do what the Lord had said to do. When your heart is heavy laden, turn it over to the Lord. So after struggling with our own intellect, we're helpless, we can't do anything about it, we just turned it over to the Lord. So we don't know when and how, but sooner or later all these things will be taken care of. That's a promise from the Lord. He's promised that to me, and I have no doubt in my mind that this will all be taken care of. And like myself and Mother, we said, "Oh my God, what has happened to morality? Where did we go wrong?" And we finally had to accept the things as they were, and learn to pray for everybody, not just our kids, but everybody is just as loving to the Lord, or just as precious to the Lord as anybody else. There are I don't believe the Lord has any favorites. But anyhow, we seem to be in a time of history now when it's the worldly thought is that it's me first and to hell with everybody else and everything else. It's do your own thing time, but that will swing back and forth. The old pendulum will swing the other way, and we will progress into a cohesive Christian unit sooner or later. And the timetable and when this all comes about, that's up to the Lord. I went to work in a parts store up in North Branch. Lowell Erickson run the North Branch Supply Company up there, and I was getting close to retirement time. I didn't want to work a full-time job or drive down the city and all this stuff, so I took a job working 4 days a week up there at the parts store. And I did that until I was 62. I guess that would be and must have been in 1976 when I was 62 years old, and by that time Mother was 65, and she couldn't draw any Social Security till I did because all her Social Security benefits were riding on what I had paid in and what I had laid up. So the February that I turned 62, I filed for Social Security, and I retired. Mary was married, Mary and Mike. I believe that was in 1975. She'd grown up to be quite a young lady, and she's married to Mike, and they lived here a year or two with us while we put in a crop. Mike and I put in a corn crop here together in 1977 on this farm, and then I put in a crop the following year, and then since that time I rented the land out. So I think it was in the year of 1975 when Mother had a very, very severe attack, a gallbladder attack, and we had to take her down to the hospital, and we took her first over here to St. Croix Hospital, and she was in terrific pain and really suffering, and they left her lay there all day in that hospital without doing anything about it, and through the night, and the next day they still didn't seem to be planning any action. So I got together with with Art and Dale and Bob, and I said, I think we'll just move Mother. So I took her out of that hospital, and we took Dale's Lincoln, and because it had a reclining seat in it, we put some pillows in there and laid Mother on the seat, and we took her down to the hospital in St. Paul. And when we got down there, they started checking her over, and they come to the conclusion that she had a very, very extended gallbladder, but they'd have to open her up to find out. So they prepared her for emergency operation, and they operated on her. I think it was about 11 o'clock or midnight when they got started, and they opened her up, and they had to cut almost clear across her abdomen. And the doctor told me afterward, Dr. Bodley was his name, and he said, I never seen a gallbladder that had extended that far without bursting. But everything seemed to have a purpose. The gallbladder didn't burst, which it had. I guess we wouldn't have Mother yet. But when she was in this hospital, she had an opportunity to witness to quite a few people there about the love and the glory of the Lord, and how the Lord takes care of everything. So no matter what goes on, I guess we got to realize that if it's in God's plan, then whatever happened, it's been something for the better. Anyhow, we got an entirely different view of life on Earth at this time, what our stewardship is and whatnot. But in the meantime, I had bought and rebuilt a few tractors and would sell a tractor and work in my shop out here. Uh, and during the summers, then Nick and Gail and Bob and um, Art, and they'd go and rent a summer resort up on Lawlers up near Henning, Minnesota, and these people used to be neighbors of Nick and Gail, and they own this resort up there. Well, then we'd sort of take over the whole resort, so we'd go up there and spend our summers up there. But it was while Mother was so very sick. Mother and I had signed up to take to sponsor a Vietnamese refugee. A lot of people were escaping the communists over there, very severe repression, and I suppose later on in your history books you'll read about the boat people and whatnot. Well, it was very severe times. We can't imagine how bad it had to be for those people over there. Well, Mother and I had signed up to sponsor one of these, and then Mother got severely sick, so I had to sort of cancel out, and I'd kind of forgotten about that. But they'd said we were going to. They had a guy picked out for us, and they had already given him the word. We didn't realize that, and then all was after we were home here, and Mother had started to recover, and we got a phone call one day, and it was very hard to understand him, and that's how we met our boy Lang. Lang Luan was the guy that we were supposed to be sponsoring. Well, we sort of adopted Lang then as our youngest son, and we love him very dearly as the rest of our kids, and Lang, he's one of our boys, and we had a lot of fun times with him. We one time when Pat and Glenn were up here, and Bob had gone with us and his family, and Mother and I, and don't remember how many. Mary was there, and Mike. And we'd gone up to Coss Dam here to go fishing, and Lang was not familiar with the way we fish here in the United States, and he not very adept yet with a rod and reel, and he was constantly getting fishing tackle and whatnot hung up in the trees, and there was a willow tree sticking out over the water, above the dam, where there's water fairly deep out there in places, but not where he went in. But anyhow, he climbed out on that willow tree to get his daredevil loose, and he gets out there too far, and the limb breaks off, and Lang in the willow tree and the daredevil and the whole works fell into the lake with a big splash. Before anybody could get there to help him, Lang was out of there. So we had a good laugh about that. 1977, I think it was in January 1977, my brother Elmer died, and let's see, we went out there to the funeral in the wintertime, and I hadn't seen him since the fall before. I was sorry that Brother Elmer had never got down here to this place to visit me. I think this was in the summer then of '78. Mike and Mary were here that day, and Crystal wasn't born yet. And yeah, I'm sure that was in '78 because Mary was expecting Crystal. And we got up one Sunday morning, was going to go to church, and Mother was standing here by the stove, and she would had started to fry some bacon and eggs, and then I noticed the pan was smoking pretty well, and I see Mother standing there by the stove, and so I went, Mother, are you all right? And she just didn't know who she was or where she was, and so we rushed her over to the hospital again and notified all the prayer groups, and when we got her over there, they said that she was having a stroke. That was the same day that Norb Westbrook, the guy that was the best man at our wedding, while Mother was in the process of having this